An introduction, whether we're talking about a book, introducing a speaker, or the beginning of a song, all have some similar qualities. Webster simply says something that introduces, as the definition of an introduction. To introduce something sets a tone or gives some advance notice of what follows with regard to purpose, style, tempo, or meaning. Now think about that. How many of you have read an introduction to a book? And it tells you what you're going to read, right? How many of you have listened to an introduction to a song? Our worship leaders have to listen to introductions all the time and remember when I'm supposed to start, right? And if for some reason the introduction is wrong, they have a hard time. Yes, we do. Right? Because that introduction sets the tone for the song that follows. You hear certain notes and you know what song is coming. Right? You have someone who's a guest speaker and they get introduced, here all the way from, whatever. So you get some idea of who's going to be speaking. I don't know if you've ever watched someone speak and you missed the introduction. You see them, and you're like, who's that? It might even be somebody famous. It's just, you don't know who they are. Maybe you hear the introduction and you're looking at this person, I don't have any idea who that is, and you hear the introduction, they go, oh my goodness, they've gotten old. Right? But musically, the introduction sets the key. It gives a musical cue as to where you're going to go and start. It sets the rhythm, right? So this is the introduction to the series, Time Change. And I said earlier, this series, if you think you know what it means, you're probably right. Come find out. And if you don't have any idea, come find out what it's all about, right? But I want to just look at a couple of things historically. This class started many years ago now, and it started on that end of the room, going that direction. So I was standing over there, okay? And it started, and I called it Home Builders. I've never changed the title of the class. We already had an adult Sunday school, and so I called it Home Builders. Later, we incorporated adult Sunday school into it, but I kept the name Home Builders in my mind, although I doubt any of you ever think about that. But the reason for starting the class in the very beginning was marriages that were having a difficult time. And at the time, our pastor and associate pastor came to me and said, would you start a series teaching about home building and working with couples to try and save marriages? Okay? That was the beginning of this. And over the years, we've had some, kind of historic little series. I've typically taught this class in series. We spent 1 year, 52 weeks, talking about the heart. How many of you were here when we had someone from the medical profession stand up here and teach a lesson on your heart and how it works and all that? Yeah, we did that. We ended that series on Valentine's, and we had a dinner and took pictures of couples on Valentine's Day and gave them to them framed before they left. And I can tell you, I've walked into lots of businesses and lots of people's homes, and I still see their Valentine's picture on their desk or on the wall or whatever, because it had an impact. But we spent 52 weeks talking about your heart. Just before COVID, we started a series on the end time and let not your heart be troubled. It was entitled Fear Not. I thought that was kind of appropriate, particularly when we were in the middle of COVID and all that stuff going on. I thought, wow, that was pretty timely. And so this series that we're starting today, Time Change, and I selected that title God and I talked about this a bit. I selected that title because it has more than one meaning potentially, right? We can talk about these times. We can talk about these times are changing. We can talk about it in light of the new year when we all make those New Year's resolutions that we don't keep, right? I'm going to change this time, but we don't. And so, again, this lesson is entitled Introduction because I want to introduce to you the series and kind of give you an idea of its tempo and its meaning and where we're going and that sort of thing. So I want to look first at Genesis 1 through 5, and it's I'm in the Good News Bible translation. It says, "In the beginning, when God created the universe, the earth was formless and desolate. The raging ocean that covered everything was engulfed in total darkness, and the Spirit of God was moving over the water. Then God commanded, 'Let there be light,' and light appeared. God was pleased with what he saw. Then he separated the light from darkness, and he named the light day and the darkness night. Evening passed and morning came, and that was the first day. And God said," and God said. That's how it all started. And God said. And God started with his Spirit moving over the face of the earth, and he created light. Which came first, the light or the darkness?
The light. He made the darkness.
Said it was already dark. Yeah. Said it was already dark.
God was the light.
And then he created the light.
God was the light.
And then it was light.
When God the light.
Because when God said, "Let there be light," there was. Where was the darkness? It was gone. And God said, "Okay, let me separate this." And then there was light and dark. Right? And sometimes when we are in darkness, remember, when God says, "Let there be light," darkness is gone. No hesitation. There's not a battle over good and evil or light and dark. It is what God says it is. What God said. What God says matters. So at this point, time began. Because it says the evening and the morning were the first day. And the evening and the morning were the first day. How many of us think of it as the morning and then the evening? But God was already busy before the first day. He was already on the job. And he said it was the evening and the morning that made the first day. And so I'm not going to dwell on this at this point just for time's sake, but your time with God, if you will spend time with God in the evening and the morning, your days will go better. You spend time with God in the evening, and then the morning, and that completes the day. We think of it the other way around. I'm going to start my morning with God. No, finish your evening with God. And so it's good night, God. Thank you for today. And it's good morning, God. Thank you that we made it through the day. Does that make sense? Okay. So time began. And then man came in and took charge. And so we have a 24-hour day. And that was created, and it runs on Greenwich Mean Time. Prior to the development of a 24-hour day running on Greenwich Mean Time, which was for a long time, days were made up of hours that had variable length. Did you know that? You ever heard of high noon? Well, high noon is a different time depending on where you are. So just the creation of a 24-hour day, we had variable length hours based on the sun. And because of that, we also had variable length days. Right? Sundown, sun up, those times change. We know that right now. We're very aware of it this time of the year because you wake up and it's already dark again, almost. You know, seems that way. And I'm not saying we're slow, but the recognition of Greenwich Mean Time was not official with the U.S. Navy until 1942. Think about that. Think how long everything had been here before 1942. And it's something we take for granted. 60 minutes, 24 of them in a day, 365 days in a year. We had that little adjustment thing for weird stuff like leap year and all that, but we take all of that for granted. Before man started managing time, it was all based on the sun. There's a double meaning there if you think about it. And then we have, I said, O Canada. A man named Fleming in 1878 decided to create time zones. And they went into effect in 1883. Mind you, the Navy hadn't figured out yet that they were going to follow Greenwich Mean Time, but this guy developed time zones. All right? And there are 24 time zones around the world. And it's based on every 15 degrees of latitude, and it's based on essentially Greenwich as the 0 point for your 365 degrees around the globe, okay? But that didn't go into effect until he developed the idea in 1878, but really didn't go into effect until 1883. And you know what caused that to really catch on? The railroad in the United States, because it was really hard for them to schedule so that you could say the train's coming in at noon, for instance, if everybody was setting their clock based on noon where they were, right? So every town had a different noon, right? The United States has technically 9 time zones, okay? China has 5. And they don't use them. It's the same time in China no matter where you are. Isn't that weird? Yeah. So what does this matter? I know you're thinking that. What does this matter? Well, here's the thing. All of this stuff that we run around holding our whole life to is a fairly recent development created by man. And because of our age, we don't have any clue about where this all came from. But we're driven by it. Right? Totally driven by it. In fact, there's classes on time management. Right? You can't manage time. It's been given to you as this is how it is. You've accepted it, and time manages you. Right? You ever felt anxiety because you were behind time? Well, it did happen in the Bible, but I haven't ever been successful in getting that to happen, so I don't have enough faith, I guess. So the question is, who's in charge of your time? It's not really you have charge of time, but you have charge of how you use time. So this sounds a little bit like a New Year's resolution or something, and it's not. I have no desire to have you make a resolution that you're not going to keep at all. But I think it's really important in these times that we get some things right about how we use our time and how we focus our time, because I think the times that we're living in are going to get a little bit weird. Okay? And if you have your time management based in the wrong things, this isn't going to be an easy time for you. Changing with the times. What do I need to change? Now, that's a big question. For today, let's say that we're going to first look at how I use my time. But you may have things as we go through this series, you may have things that you go, you know what, I need to change that. But the basic premise, the basic plan that we're going to use isn't going to change based on what it is that you need to change. And that's why I don't like the idea of a resolution. I like to change the way we think, right? In teaching, I have always tried, whether it was technical, computer courses, whatever, I've always tried not to teach you the steps to do something, but to teach you how to think about what you're doing so that you can develop the steps at work, right? Don't do something because I said so. Do something because you thought about it and you know what to do, all right? So what do I need to change? I need to change how I use my time. Why do I need to change that? I need to change that because, let's be really honest, what you're doing isn't working. The very best of you at managing your time stress about it. And the very worst at it stress everybody around them. Am I right? When do I want to change? Well, we have New Year's resolutions because it's easy. It's January 1, I'm going to change everything. Right? So I set something on the calendar. I set something on the 24-hour time frame based on where I live. Da-da-da-da-da. How about now? You've heard Pastor talk about God is now, right now. That's the idea of present. See, one of the things we have trouble with, diets, New Year's resolutions, whatever, is we tie them to something on the calendar or on the clock, and we try and adhere to that. And maybe the reason we selected whatever starting point we selected is based on something that just doesn't work for us, right? How many of you wear a seatbelt when you drive your car? Look at it. That's like 100% of you, right? If you go back not that many years, I wouldn't even have had half of you raise your hand. But somebody came along and said, this is the new rule. This is how it has to be. And so you had to learn a new habit. And that habit was to put your seatbelt on. And, you did it 2 weeks in a row. And then after that, you didn't even have to think about it anymore. Right? You got your idiot bell thing on your car that rings or dings or whatever if you don't put it on. But how many times has that even gone off in the last year? Probably none. Because you get in, you put the seatbelt on. So when do I want to change? How about now? Change now. Why? Because you're going to take control of how you use your time. So start now. In fact, the reality is it's a great time to start because guess what you live in? Now. What's past? It's behind you. What's ahead? You haven't got to yet. I need to do things differently now. And how am I going to do that? How am I going to change how I deal with time? And here's the answer. I'm going to let God manage my day. I'm going to let God manage my day. If I end the evening thankful to God, and I get up in the morning thanking God for the day that we just completed, I have a different attitude. I have an attitude that's more grateful. But I also have a focus that is on God. More than anything else, that's going to change the way you think and do things. And if you take your schedule that you have for the day and all the things you have to do, some of you probably have a lot to do. I write a list of all the things I need to accomplish every day, and I check things off as I go. And sometimes my list has 30 items I need to deal with. I'll just tell you straight up. Human beings, if they can do 10 things in a day, that's massively huge. Most days you can do 3. Okay? That's the reality. So when I start and I look at 30, I go, oh, Lord, I am going to need some big time help with this, right? But, you can ask God for how. If you talk to God, you can say, God, I don't even know how to solve this problem. Can you help me? And I told some people last night at prayer, yesterday was an interesting day for me. I have 2 phones I wear, okay? One is work and the other is personal. This is my personal phone here. I went to the dump yesterday. It was raining, it was nasty, it was muddy and yucky and everything else. And I was throwing trash, and I felt the trash can catch on my phone. And I looked to make sure it was there, and it wasn't broken, and it was properly secured and all that. I even touched it to make sure. And then I got another trash can, and I threw it out, and I didn't catch it or anything. And I thought, I better just keep an eye on this. So I checked, and it was still there. And I finished unloading the truck and getting everything ready to go. And I left and started driving. And I drove about 10 minutes, and I thought about my phone for something. I looked down, and no phone. And I looked, and it's not in the seat. So I asked my wife, I said, we got to stop here for just a second. While we're stopped, will you call the dump and ask them if they can just look and see if my phone is out there on the line where I was dumping everything, and we're going to head back over there. And she did. And they kind of chuckled and said, not going to happen. It's probably been run over by 2 tractors already. And so she's praying, and I just very quietly, I'm like, God, I do not need this right now. If there's any way you could help us find the phone. I mean, I know how ridiculous that request is, all these things considered, but if you could help us find the phone, it would be awesome. And we got out there, and we started walking around the slop and the muck and all that stuff looking for my phone. And I could tell the tractor had been through, but not right where we had dumped. I mean, it's now 40 minutes later or something like that. And there was a guy parked pretty much where we parked, and he was kind enough to move forward so we could look and see if it was there where he was dumping, and no. We tried calling the phone, and finally I said to the guy that was there, I said, well, it's probably just gone at this point. I said, do me a favor. Here's my wife's phone number. So if you find it, would you give me a call? And he goes, oh, absolutely. I said, okay, I really appreciate it. And he goes, well, we've all lost phones out here, and you can't find them. So okay. So we turned and started walking back to the truck, and we were about 10 feet from the truck, and he hollered, and he goes, hey, is this it? Yeah. He said, I found it. It was on top of a bag. Thank you, God. Right? God can solve problems I can't even comprehend. I know that's a simple little story and it's a simple little thing, but It wasn't even that muddy. It was a little bit muddy, but it wasn't damaged. It hadn't been run over. You know what I'm saying, right? Yes. Thank you, God. I can manage my schedule and I can do more when I start by putting God in charge of what I'm. God, you know today what my day is going to hold. I have 30 items listed here. I have no idea how I'm going to get through, but God, I give you my time. And that's the commitment part on your handout sheet. Say that prayer. God, I give you my time today. Use me for your glory. You say, well, I have responsibilities. Do you think God is not aware of that? Do you think God doesn't want you to do well? He does. But free your mind from the grasp of some time schedule and give it to God. Let him lead you in your time. God, help me with my schedule. God, help me get things done. And, I'm very grateful. There's someone that's some of you might know, I'm not going to name them, but a friend that we pray about things for each other. And he asked me a few weeks ago, he said, what could I pray for you for? And I said, you could pray that God will help me with my schedule and with my time. And it was that moment that I thought, you know what? I need to talk about time and changes and how we deal with putting God in charge of our time.